and we're gradually, beginning to identify the genetic markers associated with educational attainment, which is a kind of a substitute for cognitive ability. And as we identify more and more of those markers, and assuming that in vitro fertilization becomes less expensive, and assuming a kind of massive shift in public attitudes towards this kind of, creating designer babies, as well as the horror of eugenics in general, my policy proposal is that we get another kind of pillar of this argument is that as this technology comes on stream, the cognitive elite are going to make use of it to kind of turbocharge the advantages that their children already enjoy.
Yes.
So, at the moment, they have to a certain extent to rely on the genetic lottery. Natural genetic variation will mean that there's a possibility their children won't be super smart. And also reversion to the norm suggests that, on average, they're not going to be as smart as their parents. So if they can overcome natural genetic variation and reversion to the norm by selecting in a laboratory in consultation with a kind of designer baby consultant, if they can identify those embryos that are the kind of little Einsteins and little von Neumanns, then my God, they'll just become an all-powerful caste that'll be completely unassailable. So it's just going to make the problem worse and bring forward the ghastly, bloody revolution that my father anticipated in the rise of the meritocracy. So my suggestion is that when this technology comes on stream, and you may be right, it may be, we may be there already, that we make the technology available for free to that 10% of the population which is the least well off and has the lowest IQs. Mm-hmm. So the children of this kind of this underclass would suddenly have huge genetic abilities, and could genuinely compete for places, scholarships at top private schools, places at Ivy League universities, Russell Group universities here, and so on and so forth. And that the utilizing this technology to kind of level the genetic playing field, mm-hmm. at least up to a point, and I'm not. I mean, one of the reasons actually it was silly to call it a form of eugenics is because it wouldn't be mandatory. I wasn't suggesting that we take the 10% of the population with the kind of least educational qualifications, earning the least money, persistently on welfare, etc., and forcibly not sterilize them, but force them to have very smart kids. I wasn't suggesting that. It would be entirely voluntary. So I can kind of reconcile it with my kind of conservative libertarianism. But so that was my proposal. And as you know, Bo, when I got a job it was certainly used as a stick to beat me with. This guy is a eugenicist, people said, when I was given some minor public role by Theresa May when she was briefly our prime minister.
Right. So I'm reminded of, I think it was a Far Side comic where it said something like, and then magic happens. And that's what I thought of your proposal. I thought you might as well propose a unicorn comes in and redistributes wealth, because people are so antipathetic to eugenics. They have such a negative attitude toward it that if you forward it as a serious proposal, which I know you did, and you made serious arguments for it, their immediate reaction is not only to reject it, but to scurrilously attack the person who proposed it in the first place, which in this case is what happened to you. So here's a couple of thoughts on that, though. So one interesting thing, this is just more of an observation, and maybe you can add to this. It's interesting that in Paige Harden's book, she rails against eugenics, and she, hurls calumnies at people whom she calls eugenicists, who merely think that genes play a large role in social outcomes. So it's weird
Right.
that she has this incredibly negative attitude toward eugenics. When, as you say, like if we took your argument seriously and we forget about the moral concerns, it's actually a reasonable proposal. Like, why would somebody who's progressive and who thinks that the distribution of genetics in the world is the problem, that's the cause of the problem, why would they be opposed to making this technology available for free for people so that they could get, say, the smartest embryo? Do you
Yeah.
have
Well, maybe we
like
have
a
to. Yeah.
well? Do you have like
Well,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say, maybe in Paige Harden's case, we have to read her book. Maybe we have to assume, as Strauss encouraged us to assume of the great political philosophers and
Yes.
thinkers of the past, is that she's writing esoterically when she condemns
Yes.
eugenics and rules out any kind of genetic redistribution
Right.
or redistribution of genetic wealth. She doesn't really mean it. She just knows that the public aren't ready for that yet, and she wants to kind of guard her flank. She doesn't want to be criticized for being
Right.
a eugenicist herself. I mean,
Right.
of course, it was naive because she was criticized for being a eugenicist anyway.
Yeah, she was.
But
Yes, she was.
but of course, but yeah, I think that I suppose one reason the left might have for resisting the idea that we should engage in the redistribution of genetic wealth and acknowledging that actually might make much more of a difference than just redistributing material wealth, is that, to a great extent, many of their philosophical beliefs depend upon believing people are born blank slates. So you can understand why the left in general would be resistant to my argument. But why Paige Harden should be resistant to it, I think, is more mysterious. And the only reason I can think is that she had to pretend to dislike it in order to protect her academic career.